Talk about Chip Kelly.
Yep.
Obviously brings a wealth of knowledge. He brings a lot of approach at what you saw at Michigan, that he's going to play to his guys' strengths, not to his system. What stood out to you about him?
I've known Chip a long time, from going back to the Oregon days, really. Like my college teammate, Jim Fisher, he was my left tackle on the punt team, and he was the left guard, I was the left tackle. And Fish was his director of player personnel at Oregon way back when he was rolling with him through the Marcus Mariota years. So, I've always admired Chip and his innovation, and, we share a common thought, right? Like it's about the players you have and the way that you disperse them, and how do I get the best out of my players? And it's not scheme related, it's more player related, player focused. And I think you can kind of see that everything that he's accomplished in his career at this point. And he just always seems to be a little bit ahead of the curve, which, from the innovation standpoint was really cool. And, I'm also, his memory is amazing. I think one of the best things I do is remember where guys are from and where they went to school, and he rivals me in that too. So,
John, we haven't talked to you since the Geno Smith trade. Kind of how quickly did that sort of come about, and what does he bring to the table?
Yeah, like most things in this league, it came fast. A lot of things happened at the combine, and then it was a week later or something like that, we had the deal done. And obviously with Pete, there's a familiarity there with the player and the organization that he's coming from, and those things always kind of help speed things up, I think, since he had such a great relationship with John Schneider, and we can all kind of tell the truth in that world. And so, like I talked about the other day, we're going to look everywhere we can for a quarterback. And when Geno became available, I've always respected Geno's ability to throw it. And then with Pete, his intimate knowledge of the person and the competitor and the preparer was huge. And so it helped us get comfortable really quick. And we're looking forward to having him for, not just this year, but for the years to come. And when we get everything where it needs to be, he'll be around. And I'm confident that'll happen fairly soon.
The draft, I know that when we talked to you at the combine, you hadn't really sunk your teeth into the class yet, but now that we're about a month away, have you gotten more concrete thoughts about this draft class?
I'm still trying to get to the draft. We keep signing players and trading for players and all that, but this draft season really is one of my favorite times, if not my favorite time of the year, because like the team building part of it and the control that you have, it's unlike any other part of, I think, team building. And I don't want to share all our secrets, but I think it's a pretty deep draft class overall, and I think you guys probably know some of the positions where it's pretty deep at. And over the next 3.5 weeks here or whatever, we're just going to try to put together a great plan to manipulate it and build the team the right way. Like it's not necessarily about adding talent or the best player here. It's about how do we put it all together, the puzzle, and make it make sense. Years where there's deeper classes at a certain position, it makes you think like, well, if we pass on it here, maybe we can get one here, but if we pass on this one here, we'll never have a shot at it. And so that's kind of the strategy that comes up over the next 3.5 weeks here up to the draft. It's hard to believe that's 3.5 weeks away. I'm right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks from Thursday.
Yeah. Putting the right pieces.
Giving me anxiety thinking about it.
Sorry about that. Putting the right pieces together, did that kind of drive what happened on the defensive side of the ball, especially in free agency? There were some guys that left the building, some guys that you brought in. Was that kind of part and parcel with that, finding the right pieces?
Yeah, for sure. I think free agency became defensive centric because offensively, once we signed Kappa, we had a lot of pieces in place. Especially when we traded for Geno, we kind of solidified the biggest spot there, and the O-line feels like it's in a pretty good spot right now. Obviously we've got a couple other positions to address, but then because we're pretty solid on offense, that usually means the free agents are on defense, and so. Free agencies, I've always learned, is wildly unpredictable, and you think you've got the market figured out and one team pays a guy this, and it's like, well, maybe you had the market figured out, but that one team decided that,
right. And
so you lose guys, and whether they're your guys that you're trying to negotiate with on that first day or other teams' players, it's hard to predict where it's going to go. And I'm proud of our guys for being fluid, as we started to realize like the market at some of the positions was really robust, and some of these guys were going to end up leaving. We had to make some hard decisions that we were able to pivot with Coach Carroll and our pro scouts, and Ben and Jordan did an awesome job kind of monitoring everything, and we were able to, I think, find pretty good value at some of the spots that we lost some higher contracts to. And then the other side of that too that people really haven't talked about yet is once we started to realize what Trayvon got and what Nate got and what Spillane got, then there's the comp pick game that you start to play for the 2026 draft.
How do you view the curve that for you guys at wide receiver? Do you feel like that's a priority to add another pass catcher?
I love how much people love receivers, and my kids are in particular. But yeah, listen, we've got a good one in Jacoby. I've always been a fan of Trey. We're looking at some other guys that are kind of still out there in free agency right now. We obviously brought in Hunter Renfrow the other day, and I think it's a pretty solid draft class too. From the top all the way through the first probably 15 guys in the draft class. Like there's some good players, and one of the things that we got really good at in Tampa is finding receivers all over the place. I saw a thing I think it was on The Athletic the other day, where it was the teams that spent the least amount of draft capital in the NFL, and Tampa was 32 on it. But I don't know, I felt pretty good about Mike Chris and Jalen McMillan and some of the other guys that we drafted too. So yeah, but I mean, we want to have an explosive playmaker out there, and if we can find one, we'll do it. But we're in such a unique position with that I'd be remiss if I didn't count Brock in that too. I mean, Brock kind of functions to me like a legit number one. I mean, he's just different, and I know he's not the speed guy down the field and all that, but he's a problem. And we've got Michael Mayer coming back too.
Obviously, Kappa, and you've talked about him. Do you see Dylan and Jordan, or Dylan and others competing? Do you see Alex as, I mean, obviously it's going to be settled on the field, but in your mind, do you see him as a one? I
think we've got a good group of 4 guys in there that have played in NFL games with JPJ and Jordan and Dylan and Cap now, and it'll bring out competition. I'm familiar with Cap. I know what he's all about. We drafted him in the 3rd round out of Humboldt State, which doesn't even have a program anymore, I don't think. Cap's a great person. He's a hard worker. He's a competitor. I remember talking to Tristan, and Tristan was like, I would never have had the rookie season I had without Cap next to me. And the communication and the toughness and the professionalism that Cap has, I think that's going to be great for some of our young guys. And, it's another big body that got in there to compete with those other guys and push everybody. And that's central to our program now, especially with Pete driving it. I mean, we're going to have competition, so nothing's promised to anybody. I know JPJ was first-team all-rookie last year. I mean, everyone's going to have to earn it. It's a totally new start here.
Is he a center now, or is he still in the guard mix, JPJ? You see him as a center, or are you still?
I think we're seeing him as a center right now, and going to compete with probably Jordan in there. And Jordan, we know Jordan can play all those spots too. And Dylan's has some flexibility at center too. Is really the only one that doesn't is Cap, and so we'll just figure out how they compete and where they go. Where they take their careers, and the best guys are going to play.
I was wondering, even though you guys got Geno, how much does that change your approach of potentially adding a quarterback through the draft? Do you still see, if you do find a guy that you like, whether it's in the first or later round, would you still add anyone to the team?
From a team building standpoint, I don't think it changes our approach at all. We're deep into the evaluation of the quarterbacks in this class, and we're going to stay in that too. And we could take one anywhere and see. But I feel like we got a guy that can go play football now, so the need and the anxiety at that position is not as high maybe as it was a month ago.
Not trying to be specific here, but there's a thought, or maybe it's a new thought about where running backs should or shouldn't be drafted, how high you should draft and how high you shouldn't be drafted. Do you subscribe to that at all, or is that? I know it probably helps you make a decision, but does it make the decision for you when it comes to analytics like that?
I don't try to devalue any position that way. We try to evaluate the prospect, the person, and figure out if they're a good fit in the Raiders organization. And so if we think that any of these guys are worth a high pick, then we'll do it. And I've never felt bad about having great players at any position on the team. And how they get there, that's how they get there. The one thing I would say to that is sometimes you do have to, what I was talking about before, if it's a deep class here and a light class here, how do we have the best 2 or 3 picks there, as opposed to just picking this guy? There's an art form and an instinct to that too. But I don't know. I mean, Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley all went to different teams and changed them last year too. I don't think any of those teams were upset about the money they paid them and what they invested in them. I know the Eagles weren't.
Yeah.
When it comes to cornerback, I know you guys lost a nickelback in Nate Hobbs and added an outside cornerback in Eric Stokes. How do you kind of view that position group and maybe it being a position of priority going into the draft?
Yeah, the star, the nickel, the position is a critical spot in Pete's and PG's defense. So that's something that we've got to figure out too. We signed Darnay back, who's played some too. I think one of the things I really enjoy with Pete is the idea of maybe playing some big nickel. Maybe Lonnie can play in there. So it's something that Chin has done in the past too. So on early downs, you get another big body up there. So it's not a Sam linebacker, but it's not a 5'8", 5'10" corner either. So we can kind of play against runs a little bit more. But we stress the importance of that position in our defense. They're asked to do a lot, and they can be hard to find. So, yes, we've got 3 guys on the outside that can all run and play, I think, and we'll just keep sorting through the nickel spot.
As you evaluated the players you already have, what stood out to you? What a pleasant surprise? You don't have to name a guy by name, but just in general, what stood out to you about your roster?
I just really respected the way they competed last year. It was obviously a hard season when we played them in Tampa. They were, I think, something like 6 or 7, 8 game losing streak in a row, but you didn't feel like that on the field. They played hard. There was pride to the game. There was competitiveness, and I think you can work with that and you can build with that. And those are the kind of guys that we want. We're going to try to add really good players, but if they'll play hard in this game, Tom Moore told me a long time ago, this game's about who can play harder longer. And if you can find a bunch of those guys, you got a chance. And the NFL put up a slide yesterday about the amount of games that came. There were 1-score games in the fourth quarter, and it was a record last year, I think they said. So it's, we know how tight it is, and really it comes down to your ability to play hard and execute down the stretch that matters. And we got a lot of those guys that'll do that.
You mentioned Renfro. Fans got excited when his name came up. Was that a workout? And what do you think happened with him last year, as far as him not playing last year? What's your take on that?
It was just a visit, just getting to know Pete and myself a little bit. There's a lot of people in our building that have a lot of familiarity with him. So we were just visiting with him a little bit and just checking in on him. And I'll just say he's in a really good spot now where he wants to continue his career. And we would be remiss if we didn't think about it. And with the kind of respect people have in our building for him and the tape that he's put on film. So, like I said, we're going to look everywhere for good players, and just because he was here and then took a year off doesn't mean we can't add him back. So we'll see where that goes.
So 2 new starting linebackers for you. Just as we're sitting here right now in April, does Roberts and White, do they fit together?
Yeah. Devin, obviously I have a ton of familiarity with from my time in Tampa with him. I still maintain that other than Von Miller in the Super Bowl run in 2015, what Devin did in the 2020 playoffs is the best I've ever seen a defensive player play. It was incredible. You guys should go back and look at the stat lines he put up. He missed the Washington game with COVID, but 10-plus tackles in every game, turnovers forced in every game, and I know what he's capable of. And he's hit a little bit of a rough spot in his career here, but he's 27 and he's a good dude, and it's good to get him a chance to maybe revitalize himself with Pete, and then with Elandon, like those Mike and Will. Mm-hmm. Devin was a Mike for us in Tampa, but only because we had Levante at Will. Yeah. So there's very few people that can make Devin play Mike. Right. Levante's kind of one-on-one that way too, and so see Elandon as the Mike and Devin as the Will, and 2 guys that can run and hit you and love to play. So pretty good combination for us right now.
What do you like about Jeremy Chin and what he brings to the safety position?
Size, speed, intelligence. Our 2 safeties, Chin is 6'3" on the button, and he's the shorter of the 2 safeties, which is, we were kind of laughing about that. Lonnie's a big person too. Jeremy's just a smart, instinctive, very aware player. And, you go back to his Carolina days, he played safety, he played the big nickel spot. He did a lot of that stuff for DQ in Washington last year. You love the size. If we play him a nickel, like in big nickel, you love the size on the edge, his ability to blitz, his ability to support the run. And then he's a guy that can still drop and play as part of the deep coverage too, deep half, post safety. He's got such an amazing skill set for a man of his size. And then you love the intelligence and the instincts that go with it.
When it comes to, obviously it's your first time being a GM, but it's also your first time working with Pete Carroll. You guys talked about your intro press conference, being excited about working with each other. Now that you've actually gotten into it and worked with free agency in the early stages of the draft process, how does that dynamic work? I know also with Tom being involved as well.
It's been great. It's been a great communication between the 3 of us and Mark Davis, and really the entire ownership group too. There's energy there that you can feel every day. I don't know what it was like in the past, so I don't speak to that. But Pete and I, even though we grew up on different coasts, we see it very similar. Like what's required, the competitiveness, the toughness, the desire and the passion to play. He exudes that. You guys talked to him this morning, right? No one's probably more excited to be here than him. And so do we agree on everything? No, but we've worked through all of it, and we end up at the right spot with just about everything. So that's been good.
What was your first trade like? As the quarterback, Geno Smith. I don't know if you negotiated trades in Tampa, but this is your first trade in charge. I'm not necessarily the culmination of a dream. You said you always wanted to be a general manager. So what was that process like?
I did negotiate trades in Tampa, but I was taking orders from Jason. You know, as how to do it. It was cool. I mean, listen, you're after a quarterback. You're after an established quarterback. You're after a quarterback that the head coach believes in and really wants to get on the roster. And you don't want to screw it up, but you want to do a really good trade value for the organization. You know, I mean, everything you give draft-wise, money-wise, is one less thing that you can do here. And so trying to find, you know, the right spot historically, looking at all the other trades of, you know, quarterbacks in their 30s, you know, the Matt Ryans of the world. Who was the Travis, what's his name? The kid that went to Virginia Tech and has played a bunch of Taylor. I'm screwing that up. No. Tyron Taylor, yeah, sorry. You kind of look at all those and then you try to just figure out like what should this look like, what's about right. And then, you know, I got a lot of respect for John Schneider and, you know, also know that he's been doing it 15 years and so he's got his tricks too that I got to be aware of. But I had a front row seat too, even though I wasn't doing Tampa, I had a front row seat for years with Jason, and that was one of the great things that he gave me was the access to see all these things, even though it wasn't me pulling the final trigger, that I had a pretty good feel for it, and, you know, ultimately we made a deal that we felt kind of mirrored what was done in the past for these types of quarterbacks.
Kind of a good year to have 2 third-round picks, though. So.
Yeah, it came in handy. Yeah.
Tom, I think sometimes is a little bit underrated. He's a listener to people he respects. How would you describe Tom as an owner?
I would describe him a lot like that. A listener, very curious, you know, has very strong convictions about many things, football related. Also a ton of self-awareness as well. And so loves to ask questions and get what you think and then kind of play off of that. And what did you think of it this way? Yeah, I did, but I thought this way. Oh, that's interesting. You know, I mean, okay, do that. I trust you. You know, so he's a listener. He's empowering. He's tough. You know, he has a standard that we all have to live up to, which I know very clearly what is. But you know, there's very few resources I could come up with in my mind that would be better than having Tom Brady around a phone call away. And you know, the way that he manages and leads is, I've always had immense respect for, going back to Michigan, through my watching him in New England and my time with him in Tampa, and then now. I mean, it's remarkably consistent to the way he's always been.
When he was at Tampa with you, you would give him a lot of extra scouting reports because he wanted those. Some of the teammates told me that. Mm-hmm. And they said that it was almost frustrating because he would consume so much information. And they said you were that way. Is that help in your friendship that the two of you are so similar in personality and in kind of drive?
I guess I would think so, yeah. I mean, I did marvel at the amount of information you could give him and that he could take in, compartmentalize, and then use at the drop of a hat, you know. And whatever we gave him in those meetings, there was always, what else? Was there more? He always wanted, what other edge can I get? I mean, this might be the one thing that I get the edge with. And I think I operate like that too, like always kind of curious, like what's the last little thing here without doing too much that you could find and use, practically use, because otherwise too much data, too much information just kind of bogs you down. And I just try to give him whatever he asked for, and we won a lot of games. So he just kept asking, I kept giving.
Ziegler and Telesco had wanted to extend Max early so they didn't have to pay second only to quarterback money. When you look at a Colton or some other guys, is that something that after the draft you'll look at, hey, who's coming up that maybe we can sign early? And
yeah, we always look at that. You know, with 1 year left, you got to kind of go through it and try to decide, you know, how do we want to build this team? And you know, you realize, and you see it every year, if guys get to the end of their deal, it gets more expensive. And if you can find guys that you know want to do a deal and it makes sense, then you do it. And if you know, sometimes the best thing is for them to go to free agency too, so they can see what their true value is, and maybe they get it, maybe they don't. You know, I take it case by case. But you know, we're just going to evaluate all the guys. I'm big into knowing the people and the person before we start, you know, doling out huge contracts. And yeah, well, it will take some time, but I'm looking forward to getting to know all the guys on the roster and figure out, you know, the right way to build it.
Given your track record, I guess it's no surprise that you guys focus on the defensive line, getting that kind of solidified with Malcolm and Adam and Max, obviously. But I'm curious what Malcolm's market, kind of where that all went. And you know, I know the 1 year deal and getting a chance to take another bite at the apple next year. But where was that? How did that market kind of shape up?
I think it was a pretty strong market for a guy coming off of an ACL injury that didn't have any film in 2024, but he had shown quite a bit of good stuff in 2023, and he was a player that I think people valued coming out because of what. And so, it was a unique challenge because that one more than anyone you were kind of guessing. There's not a lot of comps to it. Like you want to say, well, not playing last year should technically hold the contract down, but when teams have this much of influx of cash and it's a pass rusher, nothing should surprise you. So, he was a guy that we targeted early as being a key member of what we want to accomplish on defense, and same with Adam. We want to keep the lines intact, and there's obviously a risk. You're never quite sure how guys are going to come off of an injury with an ACL injury like he had, but all the stuff that I learned about him and meeting him, and the rehab that he's done and where he's at in the rehab, it all looks great, and so I felt like we had the best seat to know where he was going, and so we could feel confident in the offer that we made him, and think that it'll work out well.
And you seem bullish about the offensive line. Was that just based on what you've seen so far on film? And there has been some significant investment in there with draft capital.
Yeah.
But based on what you've seen on film, you feel pretty good about that group?
Yeah, there's a bunch of high picks in that room, really. What's the lowest drafted guy is a third-round pick between Kappa and Glaze, and that was Parham?
Parham was
third pick, yeah. They all look like starting level players to me at varying. We can all, are you elite starter? Are you a here starter? But they're all, I think, wired the right way. They're competitive dudes. They've got some size. So there's a lot of things that you like about that group. But we're not gonna stop trying to add good linemen. I was talking to Liam Cohen yesterday, and he was like, Spy, the one thing I underestimated before I got here was how good the O-line was in Tampa. We had 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks in that line, and Ben Bredesen was a 4th-round pick. So you got to invest.
Yeah.
What do you see at right tackle? You see that being DJ's spot, or is there competition there? Who's in the mix at right tackle?
Well, Glaze right now, obviously, and then we got a draft, and we got 9 picks, and I love linemen.
As much as it pains me as a Spartan to say it, you were there's so much talent at the Michigan Pro Day when you look at those guys, and they fit your mentality of what you're looking for in a player. Do you have certain schools where you just look at, okay, there's this kind of coaching, it's this kind of system that you look at and really identify, those are my kind of guys?
Yeah, certainly. I'm not going to share them with you because I don't want to give tip to anybody. But yeah, there's a handful of programs. One of the ones that we picked over and over again in Tampa was Washington Huskies. They came from Chris Peterson, and they were about the right kind of things, and we hit on almost all those guys. And there's certainly programs that do it a little bit better and a little bit smarter, and they teach these kids, they grow them into men, and so when you get him, he's only 22 or 23, but he feels more like a grown-ass competitor than some places, and there's no certainties, and there's good guys that come out of Michigan and there's guys that don't want to come out of Michigan, but it's one of the things we certainly talk about. Yeah, and I've got my biases with that, and Michigan's been a good bias lately.
Good one.